we said 17.8 and 13.4. For the last 8 years, that was the best we could achieve in 2015. That is total revenue against, total tax revenue. Are we anywhere near? Towards the end, 2022, 23, and 24, total revenue, if you express as a percentage of the GDP, is 16.7, 16.8, 16.9, not up to the 17.8, nearly 18%. Similarly, 13.4 tax revenue will come close. So I heard somebody in GRA saying there's a tall order. Yes, this is what it means. GRA is supposed to be at the sub-Saharan African average of about 17 or 18%. For for low middle income countries, or even for low income countries. As a middle income, we should be at 20%. You can see from the numbers that tax revenue is nowhere near even 14%, for the future, let alone be at the African where Kenya and others are at 17%, before we even move, to 20% as a middle income country. So it means that the government's own numbers show that we need to do more, on revenue, if we are to get out of the woods. If revenue is going to be a solution, to the program, the others are non-tax revenue and the rest. You can see that the dominance, so you can see that why we are focusing on total revenue and total tax revenue. Those total tax revenue contributes the largest, to total revenue. And therefore, issues like what are we doing with the VAT, it repeats itself. What are we doing with VAT? What are we doing with corporate income tax? Those are the main sources of revenue. If we keep disturbing them, if we keep blocking input tax credit for VAT, raising corporate income tax instead of strengthening collection and the rest, right? You can see that, when you go back, you can see it hasn't made, those measures have not brought in, any significant change, and going forward, because what we have there is all the way to 2024. You can see that it's not bringing in, much, change. So revenue, unless we intensify our efforts, may not be, part of the solution. These are all the taxes, and you can see. Now you can see something happening that even ESLA is about equal to the grants. And this is the problem that the middle income African countries are facing. When you become middle income, you begin to lose grants. So you see grants, the highest level of grants we got, I believe, was 2015. And that was because the World Bank withheld budget support until we went into the IMF program. And so immediately we went into the IMF program and they released it, the grants, shot up. But it didn't repeat itself, right? So this is the structure, we can't rely much on grant as a middle income country. We can't rely much on debt forgiveness. So we have to intensify our own domestic collection, and move the numbers up. These are our main revenue sources: corporate income tax, VAT, excise. These three, together with import duty, are the ones that give us, the most revenue. You can see that the corporate income tax is hovering. It moved up from 2.3, then went up, after the retention of the, the temporary taxes, the corporate element, and then also the increase in the personal income tax, rate corporates and others, some intensification of collection by GRA. But you can see that the VAT, which used to outstrip it because of the disturbance we have with the VAT, has become almost equal, with the corporate income tax. The VAT is no longer, and the VAT is the engine. It's no longer, the vibrant and the buoyant, we say, that's the word we use, source of revenue, for the nation, because it is almost at par now with corporate income tax. The reason is that corporate income tax has all the incentives that we give, tax holidays and, all the things that, they have more of it, but the VAT is supposed to have very little. It's just exemptions for education, health, the basic things, and so supposed to bring in, more revenue. But if it has become flat, then we need to examine some of the policies, removal of the national health insurance, GET fund, and all those things from the VAT base. They are not yielding anything. Why? Because they are blocking input tax credit, increasing prices. And so you are likely to be having tax evasion and avoidance, taking place, quite seriously. That may not be the only, of course, the economy also has something to do, the current stage that we have. So you can see again your total tax revenue, and if you put it in graphic forms, you can see that you see the peak in 2015, it has not been equal. It was only the 2020 budget, the one that had a low deficit, that was supposed to bring enough revenue. It couldn't, so we lowered it. But this is also partly on account of, COVID. And then going forward, it does not improve the current situation. The current situation is always to your left. So if we are looking forward, then we need to improve the situation. In the case of revenue, go up. In the case of expenditure, cut down some expenditures, right? So in summary, instability of policy, like blocking the VAT, of course the rebasing also is, we shouldn't put all of this, on the doorstep of GRA. Yeah, because when you rebase, remember you increase your GDP, right? And therefore your revenue as a percentage of GDP goes down. Your debt goes down, but your revenue also goes down. Your expenditure goes down, the ratio, but your revenue also goes down. So it sort of neutralizes, right? So after the rebasing, we're supposed to, intensify more efforts. And what does the rebasing do? Rebasing is saying that the economy in the measurement of GDP, right? In the measurement of GDP, services is growing more than, say, agriculture, right? We are exporting oil. So oil has become probably more dominant than what? Agriculture, because we've not modernized agriculture and the rest. So we changed the basket. The weight used to be more. You give weights to the sectors. So you change the weight, to services, right? To industry, particularly the industry, petroleum-related industries, to, those sectors are growing. Now, in terms of tax, what it means is that your old tax regime that was focused on cocoa, we removed export duty, that was focused on the old industry, should also now shift. Your VAT, your corporate income tax, GRA should have the wherewithal to tackle the financial sector. It's new. To tackle the communication sector. It's new, right? It didn't used to be, if you ask me, it's just I teach and I upgrade myself. Then when I was collecting taxes or part of the collection mechanism in the 80s and 90s before I left VAT and the rest, we were not thinking about VAT and the services sector because they were not significant to the economy, right? So when you implement a measure as in 2015 to extend the VAT to those sectors which are the new economy, right? And they are pulled back, it means you are not expanding the tax base. Expanding the tax base does not always mean that the traditional guy by the roadside, should be taxed. It also means that your sectors of the economy, which are new, must be covered by what? Your tax, because they now form a larger share of your GDP. Services is the largest, of our GDP. So this is what we mean by stability of the tax base and then going into new areas of the economy. Does expenditure have a solution? We can see from the numbers. We were at 2013, 2022.2 in 2013, mainly on account of single span. The arrears, but once the arrears were cleared, you can see it came down to 20.6, right? And then, it went up slightly 2015. Why? Because crude oil prices fell then, but we had to maintain some expenditures. Now, you remember the 2.3 that we spoke about, which is the offset that we spoke about at the beginning. If you deduct it from 2016, then the 2016 expenditure ratio is not 23.8. It is actually 20, 0.5, which is very low. Now, we repeated that 20 in 2017. Then we were supposed to be going down on expenditure, thinking we were doing well, together with the arrears and the rest, only to wake up 2020, this 2020 actual, and the 2020 revised budget, that our expenditures have, ballooned, right? Which is the cumulative effect of the offsets and other things. So what it means is that expenditures, even at, okay, let's go to the next, yes. So this is going forward. You can see that if you compare it to where we were at 2020, that is 2025, after the adjustment, to give the picture, the real picture of the economy, including COVID, of course, then assuming we should come down, remember your ratios are very low for revenue. So if we should try to come down to say 20.6 or 21%, right? Then it means that it must show. But you can see that it's towards the end, the 2024, that you've come down to 21% to 22%. As at 2022, next year, we are 24%, right? And we know the absence of the arrears. If you do not have arrears, it means that you won't have expenditures, and that is accounting, for the loan numbers there, right? So, and you can see again, recurrent expenditure taking a lot. If you go by the recurrent expenditure line, which is the third line, you can see was 18, went down to 16, 17, 16. Then in 2020, it shot up to 2022. And we are not expecting to reduce the 2022, towards the end. You come back, here we have the 2020 budget numbers. But if you go to the 2021 budget numbers towards the end, you can see recurrent expenditure is increasing, it's not decreasing, to 22.7, 21.5. Then it starts going down, to around 20%. And then, the average is, that's 19, the average is about 21, which means that they have not gone down from the past levels. So, at best, we may be able to keep expenditures at the spending levels. But remember, those spending levels are the ones that are also leading, to the problems that we have. This is a clear picture. This is what we've been talking about. Blue line is compensation. The deep orange line is interest payments. I hope so. Reading from far. Your line that cuts across is your tax revenue line. So it means that only these two items are consumed completely by tax revenue. And then you can see the others coming up, subsidy, the recurrent expenditure, capital, they are all, borrowing. Now the picture does not improve very much. The areas where the two go down is actually the 2020 budget and the 2019, which were low. But immediately you cross that to the revised budget in 2021, the 2020 revised budget and 2020 budget and the projection going forward, you see that the picture is virtually the same as where we came from, or just slightly improved, which means that we expect to continue, to depend on loans, which is above, anything above the line, to pay for those expenditures. It's not sustainable. This is what we were trying to move, away from. Okay. So, this is the interest and compensation. You can see interest, because of the borrowing that we are doing to meet almost every expenditure, has risen. There was a big gap. The blue line is wages. It was high in 2013 because of the single spine arrears. Once it was cleared, you can see the steep drop, and then it flattens. But interest, because of the borrowing, keeps going up. Now, the situation was supposed to improve in 2020 budget. You can see the orange line, going forward. But then it spiked with the revised budget. Then was supposed to go down, in 2023. But, we have already had, expressed some of the reservations. This will require significant repayment of our debt to have that picture. We will see it when we come to the debt. So again, in summary, compensation and interest will continue to be a major constraint. As we speak, wages are now being negotiated to be included, if there's any increase, however modest, in, mid-year review for this year, right? We'll see whether we have done much with, interest. Otherwise, the squeezing of capital expenditure in particular will continue. And this means that some of the initiatives, if you have such a picture, some of the initiatives in the budget, right, for private sector, for whatever, we're talking about, infrastructure and others, borrowing is getting to its limit, maybe stalled, right? So the big ticket items are a border. Free SHS, interest payments, wages, subsidy, and the rest, right? So we need to have a consensus, on this. A well-meaning consumption expenditure, right? You can have a consumption expenditure, it's well-meaning, but if you are going to, borrow to finance them, then it's not sustainable. It's like a household, right? It's like a household. It may be nice to have nice dresses, flashy cars and the rest, but if they all are based on borrowing, your car will be repossessed, right? I mean, borrowing which you are not capable of paying. So what we are talking about is no different from a business or, from a household. And that's why, as a nation, if it is costing us in terms of debt, then we have to, re-examine, right? Because we all now know the cost. That's in terms of debt. From the figures I gleaned from Parliament, about 2.2 billion of the 2020 bond was used to support free SHS. That's how come, in addition to oil revenue, capping, and the rest, right? So that's what it's, So it's not, when you say this, it's not being anti-free SHS. I always say that I'm somebody who went to, to school on a cocoa board scholarship because my parents are cocoa farmers. So I'm not anti-free education at all, no. Right, but we're saying that, we must find a middle ground. When the nation contributes to many of us here, I would say almost all of us here, right? When we have children, we should be capable, of, say, paying their fees. I'm not the only person saying this, so that, the focus will be on, on the poor. Yeah, we may have come from poor backgrounds, many of us. Our parents sweated, markets, farms, and whatever. But we must face the reality, when certain expenditure is unsustainable, and go back, to it. Is it a signal that we are at the end? Okay, so we spoke a lot about the arrears already, the exceptional, and all the rest. We can come back with questions, on this, in this area, as we go forward. So this is the behavior, of, our fiscal deficits. And you can see towards the future, we are focusing on the future. We know the past. You can see that the levels of the expenditures, one of them is supposed to come down steeply, that is excluding, that's the one that excludes bailout costs. But once you include the bailout costs, then you can see that the yellow line, flattens and it goes up, right? So, and you see that the levels going forward are just about the same as where we're coming from, right? And that means that the borrowing, may continue. So this is how we have treated arrears. You can see, yes, we had single spine and other things. So in 2013, the blue line is the routine arrears. So you could see that we were having, heavy arrears, then the 2016, that is a 2.3 offset. So all of a sudden it becomes positive, and that's an offset, so we cannot ignore that. But then what happens is that 2017, you see that the arrears provision in the budget keeps shrinking, and sometimes they are zero in the budget. You can see the blue line, right? One, we have an expanding economy. Two, we know we have energy costs. We know we have bank bailout costs. We know all this, and we are being told we are borrowing to pay all of these things. How come are they not reflecting in arrears? One of them is because we are excluding them as, as appendix, footnotes, but then when it comes to financing, we finance them anyway. And so the debt, exposes us. And then despite having ESLA, which was supposed to make some of these payments, you can see from the deep orange line that it's not every year that we have made provision for ESLA.